The American Empire, U.S. Foreign Policy. This is the second video of the American Imperialism Unit. We will take a look at the annexation of Hawaii and the United States' expansionary foreign policy in Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The annexation of Hawaii. Hawaii is an archipelago or chain of islands in the Pacific Ocean. During the 19th century, Hawaii had served as a strategic location and coaling station for ships on trips from the United States to East Asia. Hawaii began to welcome American settlers who bought land and set up sugarcane or pineapple plantations. Soon, there were increasing tensions between the American settlers and native Hawaiians. Hawaiian King Kalakaua was forced to accept a constitution that restricted voting rights and gave American landowners greater power and representation in the government. When Queen Liliuokalani came to power in 1893, she tried to take back political power. American landowners overthrew Queen Liliuokalani's government with help from the U.S. Marines and formed a provisional government of their own, asking the United States to annex the territory of Hawaii. President Cleveland refused to annex Hawaii, and Congress agreed not to interfere in Hawaiian affairs. In 1898, with the Spanish-American War, there was an imperialist sentiment in the United States, and a new request for annexation was approved. Congress overwhelmingly voted to annex the territory of Hawaii. Along with Hawaii, the United States had other possessions in the Pacific: the Philippines, Midway Island, Guam, and Samoa, which was occupied by the United States and Germany. American foreign policy in Asia. In the late 18th century, the United States was actively trading with China and Japan. After the Spanish-American War, the United States would become an important power in the Pacific. The Open Door Policy and the Boxer Rebellion. European powers were claiming exclusive trading rights areas in China and setting up their spheres of influence. U.S. Secretary of State John Hay was afraid that the spheres of influence would cut off American trade in China and proposed an open door policy. Under Hay's open door policy, all foreign nations would enjoy equal trading rights throughout China. Only a few months later, the Boxer Rebellion erupted in China. Boxers opposed foreign influence in China, targeting and murdering Chinese Christians and foreign citizens living in China. An international military expedition, formed by European powers, Japan, and the United States, stopped the rebellion. The United States successfully opposed European and Japanese attempts to divide the Chinese territory, and Chinese territorial integrity was respected. The opening of Japan. In 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry entered Tokyo Bay with U.S. warships and demanded that isolationist Japan open up for trade. Fearing foreign domination, Japan became the first Asian nation to industrialize and adopt Western ways. Japanese industrialization also led it to build an empire. In 1895, Japan defeated China in the Sino-Japanese War, obtaining the territories of Taiwan and Korea. Next, the Japanese defeated Russia in the Russo-Japanese War. President Roosevelt was invited to mediate in the conflict. Both sides signed the Treaty of Portsmouth in 1905. Roosevelt even won a Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts the following year. Russian and Japanese leaders, however, resented the treaty and felt that Roosevelt had been unfair. Bad feelings between the United States and Japan increased as Roosevelt negotiated the Gentleman's Agreement, which was humiliating and greatly limited Japanese immigration to the United States. The United States and Latin America. The Panama Canal. Alfred Thayer Mahan had recommended the construction of a canal through Panama, and the Spanish-American War had demonstrated the need for it, as the United States had troops fighting a war in the Caribbean and the Pacific at the same time. By 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt decided to build the canal through Panama, which at the time was part of Colombia. Roosevelt offered Colombia an annual fee of $10 million for exclusive use of a strip of land for the canal. Colombia wanted more money and decided to delay the negotiations. Roosevelt was impatient and decided to negotiate with Panamanian rebels who wanted to establish Panama as a new country. A U.S. warship prevented the Colombian forces to put down the rebellion, and the United States gave Panama immediate diplomatic recognition. Panama agreed to hand over control over the Panama Canal Zone, a 10-mile strip through the center of Panama. The construction started immediately. Besides the challenge to cut through hills and jungles, workers also faced tropical diseases like malaria and yellow fever. The Panama Canal took more than 10 years to complete, at the cost of thousands of lives and $400 million. Roosevelt's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. In 1823, President Monroe announced the Monroe Doctrine, which stated that the United States would oppose any attempt by European power to establish new colonies in the Western Hemisphere. At the beginning of the 20th century, many Latin American nations had foreign debts they couldn't pay. European powers were threatening to collect the debt by force. President Roosevelt reacted immediately and decided to extend the meaning of Monroe Doctrine to avoid European intervention in the Americas. In 1904, when the Dominican Republic entered a foreign debt crisis, President Roosevelt intervened, informing European creditors that the United States would collect payments on their behalf. The United States took over customs collection in the Dominican Republic, turning over more than half of all receipts to foreign creditors. This approach of not allowing European intervention became known as Roosevelt's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. The United States became an international debt collector and police force. In the Roosevelt presidency, the United States would constantly intervene in Central America and the Caribbean. Countries like Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic also became virtual American protectorates. Roosevelt's approach to foreign relations was known as big stick policy because of Roosevelt's motto, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." Latin American nations resented big stick policy and constant American intervention in their affairs. Taft and dollar diplomacy. President Taft tried to replace Roosevelt's constant interventions with his dollar diplomacy. Taft encouraged American bankers and entrepreneurs to invest in Latin America as a way to advance American foreign policy. Whenever Latin American nations did not comply with American demands or could not pay loans, the United States would send troops. U.S. Marines intervened in Nicaragua when Nicaragua could not pay back its debts and refused to transfer control of railroads, custom duties, and national banks to American bankers as a form of payment. Foreign policy under President Wilson. Woodrow Wilson's presidency was marked by intervention in Latin American affairs, despite his former criticism of the imperialist policies of the Republican presidents that preceded him. Wilson intervened in Haiti, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic, and in 1917 purchased the Virgin Islands from Denmark. Wilson became especially involved in the affairs of Mexico, in the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution. In 1913, General Huerta turned against the elected government in Mexico, murdering its leaders and establishing a new government. The United States did not recognize the new government, and Wilson applied a policy of watchful waiting. In 1914, Wilson sent troops to Veracruz to prevent a shipment of German arms to Huerta's regime. That same year, the United States recognized the Mexican government, after Huerta resigned and left for Spain. Mexican rebels resented the recognition and continued to fight the Mexican government. In 1916, Pancho Villa and his rebels attacked American workers in Mexico, and even crossed the border to attack a town in the United States. Wilson sent troops in Mexico to chase Villa, but never caught him. U.S. troops remained in Mexico for a year, until 1917, when the United States entered World War I.